November because it was before we approved the budget, and we approved the budget in November.
I was trying to make sure you knew.
Right, where'd you find the photo? Andy's market. Like grapefruit and Apollo had a baby. Yeah, I love her.
These fancy people.
I know, I was like, what's a pomelo? I didn't even know what it, like, what's a pomelo? Is it a fruit or is it a vegetable?
Travel to Europe and
And he was.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there you are.
You don't even know.
I had no idea. That's awfully fancy.
Sounds like,
Fancy.
uh,
Yeah.
what are those Scottish games?
Grade
where-
Been a long
three,
day.
Chondo Mahalusia.
You know what I'm talking about? And now we have a photo that.
Um,
Extra articulate appears normal and is functioning. Unfortunately, he has a third over the central and medial facet of. Okay, I shaved. What the heck is that? Chondromalacia.
I saw that one. Very expensive, not why that. You know, it's.
Damage to the cartilage under the kneecap. Cartilage under the kneecap is a natural shock absorber. Patella made to.
Madam Mayor, your mic is on. We are live streaming and recording and ready to go.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It is 5:31, so I now call to order the City of College Bay City Council Workshop for Tuesday, February the 4th. Mary Elizabeth, will you please take roll call?
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Jessup,
Present.
Councilmember Cleveland,
Present.
Councilmember Espinoza,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
Present.
Councilmember Williams is absent for now. Councilmember Sherman. Present. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Will you all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, it's now time for public comment. Mary Elizabeth, did anyone submit a written comment in advance or request to speak via telephone or virtually?
No, ma'am.
All right. So if there's no one via virtually, if there's anyone in council chambers who would like to speak during public comment, please raise your hand. I don't know. All right. No one wants to do public comment.
This part usually takes a really long time too.
Yeah, to look through all the chairs to make sure, right? All right, let's move on. Workshop topics. There's 5 topics on the agenda for tonight. First, Mr. Nelson from RH2 Engineering joins us to discuss drinking water well number 8. Who's presenting on that?
He's
Yeah.
he's online.
Oh,
Yes. Hello. Good evening, everybody. I've not had a chance to meet any of you yet. I've been working with the city on several other well projects, well 4, well 6, and now I've been working on well 8 with RH2 Engineering, with Ryan Withers and with Paul Cross. I was asked by Robert Andrews and also Mike Rizzatello to provide a summary of the well conditions at well 8 that we observed during drilling and testing, and then some of the conditions that we have now and are experiencing with the well yield and some options for improving that well yield. So what I'd like to do is go through a little bit of the summary of the well drilling itself and talk about the conditions that we observed and conditions that we're facing. So if you have questions, I guess signal for me to answer those questions, and I can pause and try to address those. This well site was selected partially on the basis of its proximity to the lift station site and being able to use that as a dual purpose facility for both water supply and for sewer management. The conditions that we expected to see at that location were similar to what we would have expected that we saw at well 4 and well 6. Typically, basalt is at a depth of about 500 feet. There are some water-bearing zones between ground surface and 500 feet, but they're usually too small, not protective enough for municipal water supply. So the typical program is to drill a large diameter borehole down to the basalt, install a steel casing that would serve as a well pumping chamber, and then drill deeper below that basalt several hundred feet until we encounter sufficient groundwater bearing zones that would provide municipal supply. That was the program that we had for well 4 and well 6, and it's the same program we relied on for well 8. The conditions that we encountered during drilling at well 8 were similar, but not that close to what we saw at well 4 and 6. At well 4 and 6, we saw very uniform basalt conditions, hard black rock, layers of vesicular or porous rock and fractures. What we saw at well 8 was much more siltstone layers, so fine, thin, silty, sandy, clay layers that were interbedded with the basalt. That was a bit out of characteristic for the other wells that we had drilled. That kind of aquifer condition makes it difficult for the driller, which is Gregory Drilling, to advance the borehole and maintain its opening while also flushing out the drill cuttings as the borehole is advanced. What can happen is that if you overpump or under drill, you might get the alignment of the well to drift off, or you may evacuate too much of the cuttings around the bit as you're advancing and create more of a larger void around the borehole, enlarging it beyond the dimensions that you would want. So those challenges were met through trying to maintain a slow, steady progress through the basalt. And Gregory Drilling was generally successful with that. He reached the depth of 800 feet, which is what we had drilled at wells 4 and 6, and had good indications of water-bearing zones at that depth of 800 feet. We saw no reason to proceed any deeper, and proceeded well completion. Part of the challenge as well completion is that you need to flush out all the muddy sediment and water that was advanced through the borehole, and to do that in a way that, again, doesn't disrupt or dislodge the sides of the borehole so that it becomes destable. So again, through slow process of trying to flush out the borehole, we were able to do that and then install a permanent well screen that would provide some stability for the borehole once it was brought online as a well. So we have a steel casing that's continuous from ground surface down to 500 feet, and then a wire mesh screen from about 500 feet to 800 feet, which has plenty of open space for water from the basalt to flow into that well screen, and then up to the well casing where we would install a pump. So that is a fairly standard practice. That's what we also did for wells 4 and 6. So again, fairly similar conditions. The next step is to install a temporary pump in the well and test to see how the well would produce relative to that well and other wells in the area, to see if it can perform as well. And what we found is that the well initially yielded some clear water, and then that water turned fairly muddy. And we had between 150 to 200 gallons per minute of flow and a very substantial amount of dry down, to the point that we could not draw any higher pumping rates than the 150 to 200 gallons a minute. We ran that continuously for about 4 hours and saw no change in drawdown, but no clearing up of the water except for some slight change. And we concluded at that point there was no purpose to continue pumping. We would just not see any clarity change or improvement in groundwater yield. So we were at the point where we had what we would call a fairly unsuccessful test. Based on what our expectations were, we thought we might get 1,000 gallons a minute. Without having an understanding of how the well was, how it appears in actuality, we had to make some assumptions about the well condition. And the preliminary conclusion was that perhaps the aquifer is not sufficient to yield that much water. The other thing that we needed to get was a video of the well screen, and we just received that early last week. And that indicated a fairly significant condition in the well that impeded flow from the aquifer into the well screen. And we found that much of the screen that was installed was still clogged with fine sediment from the drilling. Typically, there's very little need to develop out that kind of material in most basalt wells. In this case, with all the siltstone that we ran through, it generated such a large quantity of fine sediment. It was never fully developed out of the well. And so that condition has resulted in essentially an undeveloped well. It's impeded from allowing any flow into the borehole and into the well for useful supply. So we're at the point where we have an unproductive well, and it's likely due to the condition of the well screen itself. We're not sure if there's also challenge with the aquifer to yield water to the well. We did see that there's a lot more siltstone, which is not favorable for a basalt aquifer. If we find that too much of the siltstone is present, there's just not places for water to flow out of the basalt aquifer into the well screen. So we're at the point where we have information on the well screen, on the well pumping ability, and talking with Robert Andrews, we concluded that the best step forward would be to provide a really focused effort on developing the well. In conversations with the well driller, Gregory Drilling, he expressed very little expertise in this kind of condition. He was not very confident in his ability to do the kind of development that would be needed for this kind of aquifer and this kind of completion. And he was essentially saying, I really don't know what we ought to do. What are your ideas? So I have had some experience with well development with another well services group and got some of their input. They looked at the well video and concluded, yes, it really needs some substantial development with the amount of fine material that's in the well screen and in the well itself. And they are providing me with some approaches and costs and timelines to do that kind of development. Essentially, Gregory Drilling did very few hours of well development and unsuccessfully. So we're at the place where this condition requires more expertise that is not available in Gregory Drilling. And we've talked about working through an alternative to do the well development and determine what the actual well yield is once the well is clear and able to yield as much water as it can. So I'll pause there and ask if there are any questions on what I've said so far and some of the progress that we are suggesting to go forward with.
All right, thank you. We'll go through council members. Councilmember Jessup.
Yeah, thank you for the thorough explanation. I appreciate the paperwork as well. Just as a summary in my head, so in essence, you're at this point where we're at, what you're essentially saying is it's still a viable option that this well, there is water to be had, to put it simplistically, and it's still viable enough to try to approach a fix. So essentially, it's a viable well, it's a viable option to help with filtering out the soot and all the things, as opposed to, I don't know how else to put it other than just cut your losses and trying somewhere differently. So at this point, you guys are kind of thinking that it's still most cost efficient and timely to do that approach at this. Do I understand this correctly?
Yes, what we've invested so far warrants additional work. It would be a shame to walk away not knowing what its true capacity is. The step is challenging, it's expensive, but it is what needs to happen in order to appreciate what this well can do in this location.
Got
We
it. Great.
have
Thanks.
alternatives for where else we might look for water, but I think it's premature to walk away.
Sure. Great. Thanks.
Councilmember Cleveland.
Forgive my ignorance, but when you say, there's additional well development that can be done, what exactly does that entail other than being expensive?
Great.
Uh-huh.
The challenge is that there's fairly fine sediment. It's at a depth of 800 feet. It tends to kind of stick to the steel wire mesh of the well screen. And so it needs some energy to dislodge it and then some pumping to remove it. So kind of the steps that are used are typically, you might have heard swab or surge and bail, where a plunger or some other device is lowered inside the well screen and is surged up and down inside the screen to disrupt and dislodge that material. That's a fairly straightforward process. But what I found in these cases where we have a fairly fine-grained material that likes to stick, it needs more energy than just to brush it off the screen. And there's a tool that relied upon in this well services company. The company is Shannon and Wilson in support with Holt Services. And they have a pneumatic tool which provides a high frequency shock impulse. It's not explosive, it's just an inert gas which creates a pulsing of the water column, and that adds very large amounts of energy in a focused zone along the well screen to disrupt and dislodge the fine sediment. And then simultaneously, water is pumped out of the well to remove that dislodged sediment with the water. So it's like a jetting in a way, but it's reverse jetting. It's not pushing water out, it's trying to dislodge and disrupt the loose material and then pump it out as you go. And you do that along sections of the screen, and the screen is over 150 feet long. So that's part of the cost, is that there's so much screen to attempt this development on.
Thank you.
Councilmember Espinosa.
Yeah, from a risk management perspective, if this well was not to work and produce any water for our city, what would that mean for the utilization of water for the city itself?
From a quantity standard, I mean, we could, quote, live with 200 gallons a minute. It would be a very low quantity. The quality seems to be fine, but it's not worth investing all of the infrastructure to bring on that low of a rate. So, what alternatives? We try the development, we find out it doesn't yield enough, we would have to look elsewhere to find that 1,000 gallon per minute yield. Now, there may be a minimum quantity here that would make this viable. And we've talked around that with Public Works, I think has 700 gallons a minute kind of threshold. If we can get the water yield up from 200 to 700 gallons a minute, then we have a viable source. It may not be a primary source, it could be a supplemental, but at least it brings it to the place where it would be useful.
Okay. And then from a financial perspective, how much more would it take to develop the well further to where you feel we should have a better idea of whether it's going to yield the quantity that we need or not?
The cost estimate that I'm getting is in the $100,000 range, and that is to do the well development, run pumping tests, and get another video scan after the well development is done. And in comparison, the total cost up to this point is about 1.2. So adding 100,000 is the increment above that, and that is still below the total budget that was allocated for this well. So we're still within the realm of what the budget was. We didn't spend the full amount to get to this point, so we're kind of spending up into that through this well development.
Thank you, Steve.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, you explained it very well, but I guess from an opposite perspective. So you've drilled this hole in the ground.
Yep.
And what you're saying is that at the end of the pipe, there's 100 feet of screen. Is that correct?
Well, I'll go through the numbers again. We drilled 500 feet.
Okay.
And in that depth, you went through a lot of fine sediment, clays, silt sands that produce a little bit of water, but they're not productive for a water supply well. So we put a 20-inch diameter steel pipe from the surface down to that depth. Then from there, we drilled without any screen, just an open hole borehole into the basalt below that pipe and 300 more feet. So a total depth of 800 feet. So we have 500 feet of steel pipe, and then right at the time of drilling, 300 more feet of open basalt borehole, about 18 inches in diameter. In that 300 feet, we installed not the full length, but about 150 feet of well screen, some sections of blank against some of the finer grained siltstones, and then open well screen against the more productive basalt. So it's kind of a hybrid open well screen blanks, open well screen blank sections to match the stratigraphy in the borehole that we observed during drilling.
Okay, so things were stirred up and it got coated. Who's to say? So it was the act of drilling that stirred this up, correct? The sediment.
Right.
Yeah, I'll use the word sediment. Yeah. So to clean it out, who's to say that it won't clog again days later or a month later? But
That's a good question.
after the act of drilling, it's kind of settles down. Is that what the thinking is, or?
Right. When you go into the drilling mode, it's, you've probably seen drill bits. They're 18 inches in diameter, big steel, lots of knobs. They crush rock, create a lot of disrupted water and sediment. That's still in there. Even during pumping, we were able to pump out 200 gallons a minute and get some clearing of that water. It started off fairly cloudy and then kind of cleared up over time. But what we need to do is take all the material that's really just settled in outside the well screen in the borehole. Again, it's 18 inches diameter in basalt and then 16 inches of well screen inside. So there's like this annular space between the rock and the screen that's full of sediment. And then there's sediment that's coating the screen itself on the inside. So you're trying to remove that on the inside and then also induce that sediment outside so that it's all flushed out. And now you have a clean rock wall against the well screen.
I think,
yeah. To know that it's done is through practical experience, just to continuously develop those screen portions until it clears up, and you see an improvement in the well yield versus the drawdown. You're just identifying efficiencies improving.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I think understand that better. So the bottom line is, it's not a case that we are in a dry hole. It is we understand it. It is the fact that it's plugged up with sediment, correct?
That's my first take. I have to be honest. Once we do this development method, we still have to deal with what the aquifer can produce. Right now, we don't know what it can produce, but we're hoping to maximize its ability to produce all. Well, we know it's going to be more than 200, but I'm going to say at least 700. If I felt like we'd only get a couple hundred gallons a minute more, I wouldn't be confident in recommending this. I feel like.
Okay. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. And I did get here right at the public comment part, so I did hear the entire presentation, but I am having a little bit of trouble hearing, so I just wanted to double check some numbers. So we have a total of 800 feet that we've drilled down.
Yes.
Okay, which seems to be in looking at the comments, it seems to be in the general depth that people have drilled around there.
Yes.
And then my other question was about cost. You said, if I got the numbers right, that we've spent about 1.2 million, and it's looking like maybe 100,000, so it would go up to like 1.3, which is still inside of what we had budgeted.
Correct.
Okay. And my final question, I think, is probably for Mike, which is, most of this is like grant and forgivable loan money, I think. If it does turn out that we have a well, but it doesn't produce enough to be viable, what happens with those grants and loans?
Well, I mean, the grant portion is still the grant. The loan, essentially, we would have to pay back on that portion. I am working with them to get additional grant to backfill it. What I will say, luckily, because the drillers stopped messing with it when they realized the situation they were in, luckily, we have extra money available there. And I did file another state capital request on top of this, just in case we need some stopgap money. What I will say is, if we can get this thing up to like at least 500 gallons, at least, then it would actually provide enough water to backfill the new reservoir, which would be useful. reason I want to bring this up to you all is because A, think we need to develop this thing and see what it can produce, and then B, the other trajectory that I would like to do along the same time frame as this is just to play devil's advocate in case the quantities it's producing isn't spectacular and we do have to do another well elsewhere. With the Martin Airfield development that's going on, I think as part of development agreement, we can get land from them for a new well, just as part of them doing that. But here's the problem. When you have your water rights, they have this really weird map with like squares that they map out through the water master where you can use your rights at. And back when we did all that exercise with Bill Nevy, that was before we were going to kick out Martin Airfield. So none of that is in the area we can like withdraw from. Now the process is not that hard, but it does take a lot of time. And because we have all these grants and loans, I don't really want to like sit back and twiddle our thumbs while we're waiting to see if we have enough water coming out of this well. So I would like to work with Bill Nevy to at least start the process of doing the squares across Martin Airfield, because my recollection last time that process occurred, it took over like a year and a half. So at least if this does not go the way we want it to go, we aren't going to be a year and a half behind and then trying to play catch up. So that's why I want to bring this in front of you all, just because there are difficulties. Luckily, since I originally put together this agenda packet document, it's a little bit rosier than those emails I provided the printouts for, where it was like we just drilled a hole and there's nothing down there. So at least the camera showed that there is stuff down there, but it may not be a quantity enough to provide the solution we needed. And the thing is right now, with the wells we have, it's not like we're going to be in a water crisis or anything like that. It's just, you have to remember when we were playing catch up all these years, that was while we had development happening, and now we have the two big developments happening. So it's just if they decide to get going, it will put us in a situation with the new housing. So that's why we need to get ahead of it. And I just want to get that water rights square thing in front of you all, because I want to work this on like an equal trajectory in case this doesn't work out the way we want it to.
Good, because that was my concern. Is I absolutely think that we should go down the more attempts to develop the well path, but I really would feel more comfortable if we are also starting on our what if that doesn't work plan, and then we can always pull it if we have to. I hope if groundwater rights works the same way as surface water rights, in order to get our first right, we would have had to do everybody in front of us. So potentially, the line won't be as long because we already did all of that the last time. So it may not take us a whole year and a half, but I still think it's a good idea to get started. Thank you.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I worked on the previous change to get well 8 authorized. Part of the time it took was just the availability of the Conservancy Board, and they're processing through something that was a little bit unusual. If we do this again, they will have seen it. They'll know what it looks like. It should go faster.
Yeah, probably not fast, but faster.
Faster, I would say
Thank
faster.
You.
It is water rights.
Councilmember Sherman?
No question.
All right. I have no questions either. Well, the ones I have all been answered. So is there a next step that we need to discuss?
I mean, pretty much the next step is that, so Steve Nelson and Ryan Withers, they're going to be working with that other contractor that he mentioned that actually has the ability to do the proper well development, and you're probably going to see a contract change for that under the auspices of RH2, since it's like a partnership, because we need to get going on that to truly know if this thing can be developed or that. And then I'm again the horn with Bill Nevy and figure out what the cost of all this is with RH2, because I want to get started on the whole water right square thing so we aren't wasting time just in case this goes not the way we want it to. But in general, in the meetings we had with RH2 and Robert McAndrews and myself, pretty much where we felt this was going was that if we can get this thing up to like 700 gallons a minute, then it's golden and we should continue to do the well house and everything else. But if it's between 500 and 700, that's where we need to have a discussion. There's ways you can scale down the stuff appropriately, but it's just the whole return on investment formula. So that's the general pathway forward at this time we're proposing.
So, Mr. Nelson, is there anything further that you'd like to share?
I checked with Shannon Wilson and Holt Services just an hour ago, and they said their timeline is about 3 to 4 weeks out. And that's just FYI, they're not under contract, but I just wanted to see where they were at.
No, we appreciate that. Thank you. Council members, any further questions or comments? All right. See, thank you so much, Mr. Nelson. We know that it's not easy delivering the ugly news, but we appreciate it. And we appreciate your work on this. Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. You have a very good evening.
All right. You all too.
Now, next, Mr. Lee and Mr. Purcell will update council on the 2024 county-wide hazard mitigation plan. Are you gonna talk to, this is Mr. Lee and this is Mr. Purcell?
Personality, he's not.
Oh, press the button for the yes, thank
There we
you.
go. So my name is Chris Lee. I'm the director for Walla Walla County Emergency Management. Patrick Purcell is not here this evening. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I know it's not a very exciting topic, but I am here to talk a little bit about the hazard mitigation plan. Please stop me if I get into FEMA speak and go into too many acronyms, because that's what FEMA does. So you are part of a larger jurisdiction that is part of the adoption signatory process to adopt this plan. It's renewed or updated every 5 years. It's required by FEMA if you are to put in for any mitigation or funding opportunities to enhance the community. And what it basically comes down to is that the jurisdictions have met the requirement to be an adopting jurisdiction, which means you're a governing body, you adopt the plan, and then your body shows the commitment to carry out the mitigation strategy and the necessary actions to carry out the plan. Those include Walla Walla County, the city of Walla Walla, Walla Walla Public Schools, of course, your city, Prescott, Waitsburg, and the Conservation District. Those are all part of this plan, and that's why it's a multi-jurisdictional plan. We started the planning process in February. It is a very large plan, and it was a very tedious process, maybe is the right word. The first couple of meetings, we had 50 to 60 people there. We had a lot of traction, a lot of good momentum, and then it kind of faded a little bit there when we had some virtual components and other things that were going on, and people had to step away to do the homework as we work through the plan. A hazard mitigation plan is, like I said, is a requirement by FEMA if you were to put in for any kind of a funding for projects, and that includes the state, local, tribal, territorial jurisdictions. Like I said, it's updated about every 5 years to remain eligible, and it goes through quite a lengthy vetting process from the state and then up to FEMA. We've had a couple of different conversations with FEMA trying to clarify the language. They don't always understand what's going on at the local level, and some of the words that pertain to us, they don't always understand what those mean. So it took a little bit of time to clarify that. So the reason that a mitigation plan is needed is disasters can strike at any time. You've seen this with whether it was the hurricanes last last year with Helene. That was, and this is not a final number, but they're upwards of about 75 billion. Just the fires this year from California, they're about 275. And those are still, you know, obviously they're contained, but they're not completely out. So those numbers are going to go up. Those are the types of situations that we're trying to prepare for and create mitigation strategies to help combat should that impact this area. Of course, the land and the situations are a little bit different. However, we're not immune to that. FEMA established the process of developing a hazard mitigation plan back in 2000 under the Disaster Mitigation Act. The biggest recent change that we've converted the plan to is to meet some of the FEMA adjustments. Of course, as things change, plans are dynamic. One of the biggest things that they really stressed this time that we had to adapt to is the whole community approach. And so we worked with a lot of different community partners from ALTC and YMCA, Senior Life Resources, you know, different facilities, Sunbridge, all of those were integrated in this process so that we can get that feedback about how we make sure that we take care of people with access and functional needs. The mitigation is also per regulation in the Code of Federal Regulations. And so it's a wide scoping plan. I don't remember how many pages we're up to at this point, but I know we're 260 some the last I checked. I've kind of grown numb to it over the last year, the amount of work and the amount of hours that have gone into it. Your city administrator has been vital to this and has probably put in more homework than a lot of other organizations has. I mean, you've worked with him long enough to understand his work ethic, and he was on top of it at all times.
Yeah, that's usually how it is.
Yeah, I'm, you know, I've only been doing this a year here, but I have learned that he is a true force multiplier. I don't know how else to.
Don't let us,
Uh-oh.
let us know how bad he is,
Yes,
right?
okay. I heard the word awesome earlier, so I'll just skip that.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
So the primary goal of the hazard mitigation plan is to reduce damages from natural hazards. I don't know if you've had a chance to kind of go through it, but it's a very extensive plan. There's a lot of historical information in there about hazards, the different impacts that they've had, whether it's the flooding from 2020 and it goes clear back. What FEMA defines as an effective hazard mitigation plan is provides a roadmap for mitigation planning in case of future disasters. That's what we've tried to develop here with the input from just tons and tons of different people. As you go through the plan, if you get a chance to look at it, and I would ask that you do, only because there's been so much work put into it. There's a ton of history in there. There's a lot of mapping. Mapping was a big component. Updating a lot of that product was a lot. We had a lot of help from GIS and tackling some of those things. The other thing that FEMA stresses is the final plan is a comprehensive document that's developed in collaboration with stakeholders and the public to provide an action plan to eliminate or reduce risks. That's the whole goal of this plan. And then to build upon that, we outline different mitigation activities, projects. And as you go through it, you'll kind of see how that develops. So starting on about page 31, chapter 4, where it talks about the risk assessments, it talks about what the hazards are here in this multi-jurisdictional plan, which is the earthquakes, flooding, severe weather, and wildland fires. Then it goes into breaking down some of the location about whether the risks are limited, significant, extensive, the probable impact and the strength, which is weak, moderate, severe, extreme, probability of future events, unlikely, occasional, highly likely. And then it goes into an overall number, which breaks down the low, medium, high. And you'll see that in the plan, and it breaks down all of the different organizations, whether it's in the county or Prescott or Waitsburg or here. Then if you go to like page 33, it'll break down in a table there. You'll see Walla Walla County, College Place is in there. It breaks down for College Place, severe weather. The location is a 3, the probability is a 3, future events is a 4, and then it gives you that number. And why those numbers and this table is important is that helps to set the stage for FEMA so that if there is a situation or there is a mitigation activity that you want to undertake for your community, these are the numbers that have been derived to help FEMA understand why this is important for here. It outlines those numbers, and those are all part of this this program that outlines it. And the stronger this plan is, and I think we've got a really strong plan, a lot of detail in it, really supports the communities when they decide to go, if they choose to go after funding opportunities to help mitigate some of this, whether it's reinforcing culverts or whatever it may look like. And that's part of it. And yes, there's a ton of information, but it's in there so that when FEMA is evaluating projects and people are going after money, they have a very thorough document that outlines everything to help them understand this region, your city, our county. Like I said, page 36 through 38 kind of breaks down some of the historical events. That's obviously important to understand as we put in for projects, understanding the history. Has this mitigation activity helped? What has it done? One of the challenges is with flooding. Once you have a severe flooding event, that has a tendency of changing the actual landscape, the river, the creek, whatever it is. And so the mapping in this product is very important to outline for FEMA what has been done in the past, what's happened historically, and what we're doing to move to manage that piece. And that's outlined kind of in page 63 with the land use and some of the development. Climate change is a big thing. That's something that was a kind of a hot topic for us this year that wasn't in the plan in the past, and that's addressed on page 64. There's a couple events that were not in this plan just due to the timing of it, and that was the Tiger Creek fire. And then we also had the bomb cyclone last November that came through, but those are perfect examples of what we have. So going forward, this is a dynamic plan. It's a living document. Here in the next few months after we get through this piece and get the document back from FEMA, the first thing I will do is add that as a revision to the plan to make sure that we are creating, typically before fire season and then before flood season, I will sit down and go through this and make sure that we're documenting anything that's occurred so that we're capturing it, building it into the plan, and making this a living, breathing document to better explain to FEMA why we do what we do. Page 100, 101, 102 talks about some of the different funding sources that are out there. Your city administrator is well aware of all the programs that are out there. He knows a lot more than I do about the different programs, and he's been a great asset for that. So there's 21 different opportunities out there. And as you go through the plan, when you start looking at some of the projects and the specific strategies that start on about page 103, as you look at these projects, it will talk about using some of these programs, funding mechanisms in here, and it outlines in each one of these projects. So you'll see like project ID, CO is county, and they kind of align with whatever jurisdiction has different projects in there. College Place is obviously CP. So as an example, number 1, where it talks about severe weather, wildfire, priority is high, what the potential cost is, then the timeline in it, and then it outlines, like this specific one talks about reservoir number 4, and it talks about potential resources. And so you list out each one of those different grant programs ahead of time so that when we go to, or you go to, or Mike goes to FEMA to put in for some of these projects, all of that is spelled out, and it makes a little bit quicker, I guess, maybe for FEMA to identify, look, and get all the supporting documentation about what's been done, what's being done, some of the historical problems, and why we need this. And so that's what I'm here for, is to basically go over this project. It's kind of been a baby of mine, and we've invested just a lot of time. There's been a lot of contribution, and I'm glad to see it's kind of wrapping up so that we can move forward and start chasing some of this to help mitigate some of the problems that are going on in the county and everywhere. So.
How long did this take? Do you remember how much?
This plan?
Yeah. This to
Well,
get here?
normally it's a 2-year plan, but when I hired on at the very end of it, I requested to change in the terms a little bit. And we made it a 1-year program to get this fixed. There was a lot of reasons for that, but a lot of it had to do with opening up funding sources for not only your city, but the city of Walla Walla, the watershed.
Yeah.
And I heard when I hired on that was
Priority.
a big issue. And so we put in some time.
Yeah, I bet. All right, Councilmember Jessup, questions or comments?
I truly appreciate this. Two just really quick questions out of curiosity. Would it be the Walla Walla County jurisdiction or the City of College Place jurisdiction for the College Place Public Schools?
So, so in this case, so College Place is an appendix to the plan. As far as College Place Public Schools, that's a very good, I mean, they were included on the it's,
That is correct.
yeah,
Yes.
so,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer.
Go ahead.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the answer. I apologize.
I said the College Place Public Schools, they were included on the invites. As far as like in-person meetings, I didn't see them appear. They were there,
But
they were invited.
Are they in the plan? That's a very big
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
Yeah.
Correct. There was a lot of organizations that were included that did not attend. Just as an example, Columbia Burbank were included, schools.
Yeah.
Did not participate, did not submit any projects or anything like that. So.
I mean, they were notified that it's a
Correct.
way to get projects funded. I can assure you of that. But, you know, it can take a horse of water, but they have a,
Let me ask this.
It's a big
Let's say
deal.
something
Come on.
happened
Yeah.
here. Say we had a flood
Yeah.
and the school, the
Yeah.
high school, the district offices were damaged.
yeah.
Are they covered under as a College Place kind of thing?
They are referenced as like a critical facility, so it would be covered from that aspect. It's just like if you look in the City of College Place stuff, we got like very granular about like fixing streets and generate, I mean, really in the weeds. And if you're going to get super in the weeds, it isn't going to get super in the weeds for the district. However, the 100,000 foot, hey, a tornado came through, I need to go fix my office, that's in there. But granular stuff would not be.
Yes.
Yeah, like the arteries that need to be fixed quickly
Yeah.
because of evacuation
Yeah.
roads and stuff. So
Yeah.
the other question is, I'm not sure if it's able to, but just in terms of FEMA,
Yeah.
are you able to speak to for future development in UGA areas or things that are currently on the books?
Yeah, I mean, with this appendix to the plan, we included everything detailing around the Martin Airfield area, the Lakeside Majani
Wow,
Road
yeah.
area. So that's all covered in there, because one of the things that I was having a struggle with the last hazard mitigation plan was because a lot of previous folks around didn't really realize what it was really. None of the granular stuff was like listed in it, so we could have got like building brick money or hazard mitigation money. But if you don't list the stuff item for item, you can't apply for it.
Yep.
So like the seismic water tower project, that was one of the only ones that was in the old one. We were able to get money for that. That's currently ongoing, but there's a lot of other stuff we could have done, but it wasn't in there, so we were out of luck.
Yes.
Now, at least for us, the whole kitchen sinks in there, so.
Thank you all very,
Yeah.
very much.
Yes. Yeah, if you don't put it in there, you don't stand a chance to mitigate what is going on. I am not going to speak for College Place, Prescott, Waitsburg,
Yeah.
anybody like that. So when we try to engage groups, it's very important, even though it can be tedious, a little bit painful, very time consuming, that I don't care how many projects you submit, I will support those because you know your community better than I do, what needs to be done. You've got a great advocate here that obviously put in 15 projects. I believe it was the most out of everybody. Which, you know, I surprise, I'm not. So, you know, and going back to the school, if you don't come to the table or put out any projects, you're not really adopting jurisdiction, because then you can't act upon those projects. And so I think that's kind of where, if you're not willing to put in the work, then, you know, you're losing out some opportunities. But this becomes such a historical and living document that we're documenting from, I don't want to say day one, but this document goes way back, a lot of historical information. And that helps lay out the picture for FEMA to better understand here. A lot of people that are doing this funding piece is sitting back east in a cubicle that doesn't quite understand College Place, Walla Walla County, or some of the, well, even just as an example, the bomb cyclone that happened in November. We pushed and pushed. I submitted all the paperwork to the state, and they're like, how was Walla Walla impacted by this? It's all Pierce, Snohomish, Kane, Island County, Whatcom County. And then you've got little Walla Walla over in the corner of the state, and they're like, why are you seeking reimbursement? And it's because it's important, and that's part of this process. We've got to be an advocate for each other. Otherwise, FEMA is not going to understand it. And now that this bomb cyclone reimbursement has gone Stafford Act, then it's in front of them. And so it's important to be out front, and I don't want to come across as being a squeaky wheel, but if we don't get their attention and make sure that they understand that we've got needs too, you get forgotten. California fires, the hurricanes, those are big issues, but we've got issues as well.
Councilmember Cleveland.
This is also kind of out of curiosity, and if you don't know, or if it's a really detailed question, you don't need to go into it. But I was curious about, does the plan include stuff on like where like restrictions on like it's not a good idea to develop this area, or development should be here rather than here? And I asked because there's just a section of land. I think I don't remember exactly where it is, but it's south of, I think, Bernie Elementary, some way south, where whenever I drive by it with my wife, she points out that this area is in a floodplain and they're developing it. And she doesn't think that's a very good idea for some reason. So I was just curious if the plan kind of covered cases and sets any kind of policy around like don't build in a floodplain.
It doesn't necessarily develop policy as far as that goes. It deals with mitigation strategies towards natural hazards and those types of emergencies. Now, we do engage the planning department. They were involved, GIS, all of those things. So there's a lot of areas that were identified. You identified a couple of areas, and I don't remember which ones they were. And it escapes me, but.
Well, I mean, a good example to answer that question a little bit, where it does go a little bit into it, but it's based on the data you put into it, is like, for instance, our public works yard relocating that's mentioned in there. And the rationale behind that is they have your public works yard at the bottom of a giant bowl that water could collect and probably isn't the greatest thing. So that's why it's listed there, because it's a counter that strategy. So
Thank you.
Councilmember Espinosa.
Just a comment. I think this is a great preemptive measure to be prepared for the unexpected and something that could occur. So thank you so much for your work.
Welcome.
Councilmember Peterson.
You know, when Mike, seismic retrofitting, was that of the water tower?
yeah, our old one, the reservoir #1.
So we got money for that.
Over $2 million. So
Through-
engineering is going on now, and then when we actually get the plans back, it'll get retrofitted and then also repainted.
Yeah, I don't know what keeps you up at night, but I think, you know, I don't, in College Place, and I don't want to minimize anything, believe me, but flooding, not too concerned. Fires, not really too concerned. Tornadoes, hurricanes, these types of things.
Mhm.
The one thing I think is seismic. I know there's a fault that runs through the Milton Freewater
There's a lot
Valley.
of faults around here.
And yeah, there's fireplaces in College Place and houses have cracks in them where it was back in the early 60s or something. Yeah, we had something there. We talked about wells earlier, you know, so if everything down 90 feet shifts a foot to the left, you know, yeah, it's going to be, yeah. So, but that's part of, I think That's gotta be, that is an emphasis, I think, as
Yes.
far as dust storms and forest fires, but the seismic retrofitting are what we can do to minimize that.
Well, yeah, I mean, wells are in there because knock on wood, we don't want to deal with that again, but also very paranoid because of what we have. So,
Yeah, anyway.
What keeps me up at night is where my office is. Right. Correct. Yeah, I'm at second rows right underneath Marcus Whitman, right on top, right next to Mill Creek. So that's what keeps me up at night.
Those buildings there, you can open the trap door and look down and watch Mill Creek when it's free enough.
Come on down and I'll show you our basement.
So he's got a water view. I think that's how they said it.
Hope you have some life jackets nearby, right?
Dingy.
Genie, there you go.
Thank you. Yes.
Councilmember Williams?
Sorry. So can you explain how this plan fits together with our emergency response plans? Is this just about hazard mitigation or do those fit together somehow?
Yes. So, well, yes, no, sort of, kind of, not really. So they're all standalone.
That explains why I'm confused.
Yes, I hear you. Trust me, I've got enough plans going that, yes, they are all loosely tied together. This deals with natural hazards and mitigation activities to support funding opportunities to help fix that. But the other part of the plans, the response plan, the continuity of operations, our comprehensive emergency management plan that outlines emergency response and resources and assets are standalone plans, but they're all tied together so that when this happens, the state can refer to our comprehensive emergency plan. We're working on some other plans, and while they're all designed to do different things, they all work together.
Okay. And this is in my looking through this is really, I think, useful in thinking about how to mitigate hazards before they happen. As Mike Marion, I've told you, after the LA fires, one of the things that I think we are lacking potentially is a place to shelter pets in an emergency. And so we may want to think about that as we continue on.
So if I may, that situation is addressed in several of our other plans. While I was not employed here with Walla Walla, I was a deputy director in Franklin County Emergency Management and had been over here several times for different emergencies. Walla Walla, obviously, emergency management's an office 2. The office I came from was 4, so we had the ability to send people. And so I was up here for many different events trying to help out Liz and Patrick with that. I did help with the Red Cross and the fairgrounds and the animal situation that was going on with that. But in my world with emergency preparedness, no disrespect, but nobody cares until, because it's not going to happen to them. And then when something happens to them, then they want the help. So the emergency preparedness piece is critical. And I never miss an opportunity to get out in front of anybody, whether it's you, the community, different events. But it's not a glamorous topic. People don't want to talk about it. People don't really understand it. And because, like has been said, it's not a big thing in Walla Walla or College Place. And so it's hard to get people engaged, and you hand out materials, and I've done it. You get materials and you go home and you go, oh, throw it in the garbage and you move on. It's just what happens. And so the pet situation and the access and functional needs is a huge topic for me. I've worked extremely hard since I've been here with engaging different groups to make sure that we are taking care of our access and functional needs should there be an emergency and we have to use Everbridge, whether it's an evacuation for how do we get those people out if they can't drive, they're on O2, they're bedridden. They get a flat tire when they go to evacuate. They get in a car accident down the street. Those are, I hate to use the word pet peeve, but that has kind of been my mission for many, many years to make sure that I'm engaging with all of those groups to make sure those people are taken care of. And that's part of this when I engaged a lot of the ALTC and the Rotary and agencies like that to make sure that they understand what's in here. And I don't care necessarily about the funding piece and that. It's about dealing with the people during those emergencies is got to be my initial concern. And so the animals and people are a big piece of my program, in my opinion.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I've seen people not want to evacuate because they didn't think their pets could go in shelters. And,
Yes.
you know, that just makes it worse for everybody. So thank you.
Yes. Well, and the one thing that I've been pushing lately is I had met with some different groups last week and they're like, well, what can I do? I don't want to leave. Where's the first place that you're going to go when you evacuate? Family, parents, friends. Store your emergency preparedness stuff there because that is where you're going to go when you evacuate. 90% of people are not going to go to shelters. Most people are not going to go to different locations, whether it's a church or a school or something like that, if they've got other contacts in the region. And so we've got to make sure that we prepare for that, deal with the pet situation, even up to large animals, because people will not leave their animals.
Yep.
And so we've got to figure out how to manage that and safely get them without sending first responders or whoever into a dangerous situation that's going to put them at risk. So it's a challenging topic.
And I'll just put in my little 2 cents that I always tell everybody is you have to keep your car title and your birth certificate and everything somewhere. Keep it in a fireproof thing that you can grab when it's time to go.
Don't forget your medicine.
Yep. Thank you.
Yes.
Hard one. Councilmember Sherman.
It sounds like a glamorous job. But seriously, thank you so much for doing all of this. It is a very nice 182 pages, I think is where we're at now. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Ms. Colwell.
Hi, I'm does it say city attorney on there? It does say that. Last year, the Walla Walla University had a CERT program
Yep.
training 3-day. Is that gonna happen again?
It is in March.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact dates, but it's
And
like the
are you
first or second week.
Of that?
I am.
Okay,
So I know
Yeah,
we're getting
you
way
wanna
sideways
share?
here, but I can address it.
okay. Thank
They're
you.
looking for sponsorship. And that comes through the emergency management office because we are tied to the state for the emergency worker program. So anytime that there's a response and we activate volunteers, there's very strict criteria as far as training and getting them signed up for liability should they get involved in an incident or respond. And so I'm not going to say that they can't do the CERT program, but it needs to have a sponsorship, which comes through my office and the emergency worker program if they want to operate outside of the campus. They do want to operate outside of the campus, so I will be there all 3 days, engaging with that group, doing some training and making sure that we've crossed all the T's and dotted the I's for them.
Yes,
So it's
please.
community emergency response team. So it's basically community members that want to be involved and be eligible to respond to emergencies, whether it's a search and rescue, a building down, floods, evacuations, and all of that requires a lot of training. And of course, the liability piece is huge. The emergency worker program is an emergency management function, and they are covered by the state for those types of activities. But it's not only a liability for them, but it's a liability for the office and the county. And so I will be there all 3 days doing some training overview. We've got a lot of different members, whether it's amateur radio or the ham radio operators, groups like that. I'm working on a DART program, which is a disaster airlift response team. We've got some individuals who own planes and they're willing to assist during an emergency, whether that's fly, search and rescue, whether it's help the incident commander fly over a flood or a fire to get better situational awareness. And then I'm sure some of you have heard about the Cascadia subduction dome, the fault that's on the west side where sadly Ellensburg would be the new west side. Those individuals over there, when it happens, I mean, it is what it is. We do exercises and all the time. And how would we move those people until the military gets there to build ports? And so there are several DART programs around the Northwest just because of how many islands and waterways that we have that people are not going to be able to move from. So that's another program that I'm working on, and that will fall under the emergency worker program as well. Yep.
I was just saying, it's not, but when I read it, you would learn like CPR, basic emergency medical, I assume, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's interesting.
I'm assuming this is 18 plus, as in 18 years old and plus.
Yes.
He's always looking for things to get his high schoolers involved in.
Yeah, sorry.
That's always
There's-
there's
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you so much.
Thank you for your
We
time.
really appreciate your time, Mr. Lee.
No problem.
And this really was interesting to hear, and how it comes together. And then it makes you think about what we're not thinking about.
Sorry about that piece.
So now I'm not gonna sleep at night.
All right.
No, we can, because he knows.
That's right. Thank you.
Guy.
All right. Thank you very much. You have a good evening. Thank you. Okay, next, Mr. Rizzatello is going to present on the community grant program applications for discussion.
Okay, thank you. So with this, we had the application open from the time budget passed through mid-January, where any organization could submit a project. And this is an orderly way to award funds, because in the past, folks would randomly come and request funds. And as you get near tail end of the year, depending on timing, it could give an unfair advantage of folks. So we got about 8 submittals. And then we have an ad hoc group of folks that represent our advisory commission's grade scores. We add up all the scores and then see where things pan out at. And this year, there's $15,000 to award. So based on the scoring, where the group landed was to Downtown College Place. There is a start of finally of an actual downtown association here to get the Main Street tax credit and so forth and get activities going downtown. $2,000 in operational expense. Walla University Center for Humanitarian Engagement, support for that Hey Neighbor Neighbor program, $5,000. YMCA scaling up the summer youth rec program, $5,000. Villages of Garrison Creek, their HOA, they had some like block party type stuff in there, $700, and then some funds to go toward putting murals up on Andy's Market and Enable Art. So that was the recommendation from the ad hoc group to bring before you all, and it's for discussion. But if everyone in general is good with it, similar to years past, a resolution going with this will come forward a future council meeting for a decision.
Just a quick clarification, the villages,
Yeah.
I don't find it in here. It has to do with their water
Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
That's what the funding was
Yeah.
for, to finish off
Yeah.
their water systems. All right, council member Jessup, questions or comments regarding any of them?
Yeah, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 applied and only 6 got money.
Yeah, based on available funds, that's where the group
So
landed.
I had some clarity, and and my apologies for not getting on this earlier, but in the application, I know that College Place High School had a lot of trouble because in the application, it was they were unable to work through how to clarify what it's being used because there's like match grant funds and that kind of stuff, and it's been awarded in the past.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit disappointed to see that it's not being used because I mean, just be perfectly frank, the funds it's been awarded in the past
Yeah.
for the same thing. It's for community engagement, it's for stuff for students and that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of curious for future reference, how then can we help them with something of that nature that's a little bit different?
I mean, in years past, if there were any issues, typically I would get an email and then work through it. The application, we simplified it about like a four page one. I didn't receive any further communications about that
Well,
this year.
well, I gotta be
Yeah.
honest, that's my fault because they asked me.
I think I can,
They asked me and
Oh.
I did not get on it early enough and I tried to help. So
I see.
I'm actually a bit disappointed, just simply for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But I thought the grant was literally to help with community engagement and impact and helping with the youth in the valley, and that what they're using the money for, applied for, was a direct,
Yeah.
and they've gotten it in the past.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to advocate
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
For that reason. I'm sorry, Mayor, excuse me.
No, I was gonna tell you, I don't recall how many
Yeah.
scores there were.
Yeah.
Individuals, people who scored it. But as a scorer, I understood what the project was because I've seen it in the past.
Yeah.
But I would think, like you're asking some parts of the application didn't really, for example, one of it was like either staff wages or staff pay or staff overage. It wasn't pay. It was like, I think it said staff overage. I
Yeah.
think that's what it said. Which I think if somebody didn't understand they wouldn't understand what staff overage is. So
Yeah. So like,
that may have not scored well.
yeah, because like we have to pay in order for the teachers and to engage and to put on said projects, you have to white sheet them and pay
Yeah.
them.
Yeah,
And so the
right.
money would be overtime, and in order to get it fully engaged, the teachers would have to be paid. That would incentivize them to engage their students after school, after contract hours.
And I understood that, but I wonder if some of the other scorers did not
Yeah.
understand that. So when they were scoring, did the application explain or was it clear what the funds will be used for? They may have scored that lower if they didn't, because they may not have understood what staff overage meant.
I would love to clarify that. I'd be more than happy to write something up if I may, or something of that nature.
So, I am happy to also, Mike, if you need some support on it, I can take a look to see how they scored.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to write.
Well,
It's like,
and keep
I'm
in
not allowed
mind
to.
with the scores, because I frankly try to avoid situations like this. I'm not one of the scorers. I have various folks from our advisory committees with the mayor score them to keep myself out of it completely.
Yeah, well, what am I too late? Or am I able to?
Well, I mean, the council hasn't awarded the funds yet, so I mean, it's not too late at all. This was just for discussion.
Yeah, well, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, be honest with you, it's very obvious that I'm advocating why I'm advocating, so I'm not trying to hide that sense, but I do would hate to see that kind of engagement of hundreds of family members with gosh, last time we had how many students? We had 140 students engaged.
I
And
attended
100
last
family
year's.
members, so
And
so
there's a lot of people.
there's
there.
hundreds of people. So I would love to, whatever I need to do on my end, obviously that I'm allowed to do.
Yeah.
I want to make that very clear, and or communicate.
Yeah.
Let me
But-
take a look at that. Let me see how it scored, how
Yeah.
other people scored it.
Yeah.
And then I'll take a look at it because I was surprised it wasn't,
And if I may
There's
also,
points,
well, of course, and the fact that like it was awarded last year. So there's
Yeah.
precedent. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll shut up.
Yeah.
yeah, I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
And talk with Mike about it and see let me see what other people thought of the scores and see why.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cleveland?
I'm glad that there's a process for kind of determining where we spend our funds. It sounds like maybe there could be maybe some extra documentation included for maybe explaining how to fill out the things if there's some confusion. I don't know if, it sounds like the application has been developed a little bit before, so.
Yeah.
Maybe making some edits, clarifications. I don't know if we have time for this, but, it might be helpful to give maybe a little bit of feedback to the applicants about, what, around what maybe weaknesses they have in their application. I don't know.
And it's a good idea to
Yeah.
definitely check.
Yeah.
Although I think the application is pretty clear cut. It includes links and, it's quite, 3 pages of explanations of how to go about it. But we could definitely see if anybody get some feedback from the applicants to see what their thought
Typically,
is.
people ask if they want that kind of information, at least my
Well,
experience. Yeah.
Oh, well, again, that's all me.
Fair enough.
Okay. Councilmember Espinosa?
No, I'm just happy that the funds are being utilized to benefit organizations in our community that are going to continue to enrich college plays and the experience around here. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a great variety of different types of projects. Councilmember Peterson?
Well, it looks like fun. Thanks.
Councilmember Williams?
No questions, thank you.
And Councilmember Sherman?
No questions except for what I'm asking Mike about.
All right, so that's a side. Okay, any other questions or comments? I will follow up with that, Councilmember Jessup, and take a look on the scorings, okay? Oops, I wrote my note on the wrong one. Okay, next is District Court Services Evaluations with Ms. Caldwell.
And actually, Mr. Rizzitello is going to discuss this.
Thank you. So just provide a little summary on this. You may recall a long while ago, we had our spirited discussion about district court services and some of what was going on. So the way to truly understand the return on investment, if you will, how to run it, best way of running it, best practices, if it should remain in-house, if we should bring it in-house or continue a contract out, is to do a study of the city of Auburn, Washington. It actually is in the same boat we were. So this organization here and I'm still working with them to finesse the cost because I think there's some efficiencies that could be had, but they've not gotten back with me with the revised proposal yet. But I at least want you to see some of the verbiage around this. This is essentially the type of study they'll essentially give us a lot of data here as far as what is the best route forward. And what we've done as of right now, because even to enable studying this sort of the thing, because there's such a long pause on the contract, we had to extend a notification of potential intent to terminate because you actually have a 2-year lead time. And if you miss that, then you'd have to wait 4 more years, which means we'd be waiting for 6 years. So we did file that, but as soon as I get the finessed information back from them, it'll go to you. I recommend doing this because with my past experience in the city of Colfax, I was the court administrator there too. So sadly, yeah. So I know a lot. Yeah. So I do know a lot about that from when I was over there, but that was over like almost a decade ago already. So stuff changes. So we really need an impartial third party to do the ins and outs of all of this. And that's my Cliff's notes on this.
Yeah, if I can please add, it was my recommendation that we hire somebody to do a feasibility study, so to say, when we were discussing this. Just so you know, when Mike said we filed intent, that means letters were delivered to the county the
And city.
and city of Walla Walla saying that this was our
Yeah.
intent. So if you hear from anybody, because I know some of our staff already heard from staff from the city saying, you guys are gonna leave, right? So in case you hear that, that's what that meant is our intent. We have to file the intent, even if we choose in the end not
Yeah.
to. But because as part of this study, since we're starting it, we have to file that intent, just clarification. And so if people are panicking, it's just, we're in the starting process of it. Second, and if you've looked at this page 14 where it talks about the cost and Mike's talking about he sent back wanting to finesse, the cost. There are some things in here that we asked, or I asked Mike to check, do they really need 3 consultants to come for 3 days, 4 nights, things like that to kind of help
Yeah.
bring down that price? Especially since we're such a small community, it made me question, they may be used to bigger.
Yeah.
Right? Bigger jurisdictions and bigger counties and things like that. So don't panic about that. Those are things that Mike did go back on.
Yeah.
All
It
right.
just hasn't gotten back to us yet, but I at least want to make sure, given the fact that intent notice swung out, if you heard out in the community, I didn't want you to be like, what was that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Because I already got a question on that.
I
today.
already met with Commissioner Fulmer on it.
Did you?
so,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. I had somebody reach out to me
Yeah.
today asking about it. All right, Councilmember Jessup, questions or comments?
Thank you for getting ahead. You guys clarified things.
Councilmember Cleveland,
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Espinosa,
No questions?
Councilmember Peterson,
No questions, thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Approximately how much do we pay each year? I know that it depends, but I mean, are we talking millions or thousands or?
I did ask for that information from finance department, but I have not received that yet.
Okay,
So I would guess that it would be significantly more expensive to run our own court. But it is the outcome, what's best for the public, right? I mean, that's why we're here.
right.
And I will add, so don't forget, Councilmember Williams, your next question. I'll find out the financial information for you, but this happened in Auburn with King County. And after they did their initial evaluation, the head judge is no longer the head judge anymore. And so they're actually asking the consultants to come back because now things might be a little different. And when we're looking at whether we want to stay or not, to do kind of an addendum. So that was the movement they got from their analysis in Auburn.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Stay in our pocket. It was.
Uh,
No one told me that.
No, it's just me. I'm just joking. Councilmember Sherman.
No question.
All right, you guys made this easy.
And for the record, I was not implying the head judge is the issue.
No, yeah.
For the record.
Clarify that. Mike, aside from informing that this is happening, is the council going to need to vote on anything at any point?
when we get the revised proposal back and it's where we think it needs to be, then yes.
Okay. So council, that it'll come back to you for final approval before we move forward. Okay, last but not least, I think it's Ms. Colwell to present from the interlocal agreement with Valley Transit.
It is me.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, hold on.
Oh.
I didn't have my microphone on. I didn't realize. So, for those on Zoom and for the record, Ms. Colwell is going to present on the interlocal agreement with Valley Transit.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, we have batted this around a lot. And it went from an attorney not knowing a lot about transit stations and the intricacies of public works, to the intent of the parties, to legal review, to our risk pool review. And basically the ask from Valley Transit is that we have an agreement in place between the city and Valley Transit that if we are planning a road project that they will have an opportunity to jump on board and do improvements and develop their bus stops along with our project. So the timing issue, when it was first proposed, it was, hey, we're going to send you a work order and you're going to send us how much it's going to cost and we're going to go. And there were concerns raised by staff that we might not necessarily have bodies enough to do an additional work within our public works, right? So we kind of went back and forth and addressed all the issues. So now we're down to really one issue that staff needs advice and guidance from council. And that is the liability issue. Normally when we do a public works project, any person that we contract with to do work for us, they indemnify and hold us harmless. So this wouldn't necessarily be like we hire an engineer that acts as our own engineer, like an employee, but we hire, a pavement or concrete company to come in and do this work. Valley Transit is, we want them to indemnify. My recommendation and the risk pool's recommendation was they indemnify us for the work that we do for them. That wasn't agreeable. And I understand that if, we're just two agencies spending money, perhaps we should share liability. We be liable for our own wrong acts. They be liable for their own wrong acts. The issue that I have concerns about is when Valley Transit comes to us and says, please help us do this. We want you to be our public works department for this project, but they've already engaged an engineer or an architect or something like that who is indemnifying them. We don't have that indemnification, right? We're not a party to the contract with that third party. So the recommendation from myself and confirmed by our risk pool, WCIA, is that for those types of projects where they've already used professional services or any other services, that we should require them to indemnify us. They won't agree to that. And our suggestion back was, well, let's have this agreement in writing. We're all on the same page, but let's go to each individual project. And if you come to us and say, we want a bus stop, handle everything, we'll pay for it, great. But if they come to us with a product already in hand and say, implement this product, we would like them to indemnify us. They don't want to do separate agreements. And I imagine it has to do with getting board approval. They want it in place to do it quickly. So I included an email exchange with the director, Angie Peters, who just said, if we have to negotiate an agreement for every project, it negates the value and we don't want to do it. So I just need guidance from you guys. I think it's a good money-saving project for them, perhaps for us, for buying bulk concrete or whatever. And we do have the option in this contract to say no if we don't have the staff to do it. But there is that risk there that they're not willing to accept, and it's just a matter of having another negotiation. So I just need guidance from you guys on what you want to do.
Okay. Quick, do we have anybody watching online?
Angie's not.
I just looked. No.
Okay. Oh, she's not in town? Okay.
No, she's not online.
Usually Angie Peters is the one that's watching. That's what I was asking. And just for the record, Councilmember Sherman and myself are on the board of Valley Transit. Not that it would change how we discuss or anything, but just for the record.
2 people are watching on YouTube.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say Mike's mom, Kathy.
Yeah.
It's like, good evening, Kathy. Paul, Councilmember Jessup, sorry.
I don't care. Boy, that seems awfully muddy. I mean, that just seems real muddy and real sketchy. It seems to me that you kind of cover the legalities and for my 2 cents, when it's not clear on liability, and from my 2 cents, I don't think that's a wise choice. Just if we're not covered, it doesn't, I mean, that's just doesn't make any sense. The second one is just my particular concern for our staff, because I know that we have I mean, a lot going on, and we have to then hire out for other jobs. And I'm not totally up to speed on the priority list of this with all that Public Works has going on in terms of our strategic planning and all the good things. So it seems to me that this would pull them from other priorities, but I don't know where this would land. These kind of projects would land on the generalized priorities list. And I would hate for something on a higher part of our priority list in our strategic plan and having them pulled for projects, because we all know that's just how things happen. And as projects come up, it feels that these are, just like everybody's entity wants to get these things done as quick as possibly with, judiciously and all that kind of good stuff. And there would be pressure there and there'd be a lot of things involved. And I don't know if I'd feel comfortable doing that to our Public Works department when they have, other things that are, there's a lot going on, and I just don't want to pull from them and the liability risk.
And there wouldn't be anything stopping us from, we all know what roads we're working on, right? There wouldn't be anything stopping the city from reaching an agreement about any particular road or any particular bus stop moving forward. We just wouldn't have this in place saying, yes, we're going to do it automatically and take on that liability.
Yes, that's my point. Yeah, I don't want to be put in that. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah.
Councilmember Cleveland.
A wise man once said, listen to your professionally hired legal counsel. I think I'll leave it at that.
Councilmember Espinosa.
So I think that both organizations would benefit by working together. But I do think that we need to look after our risk mitigation. And so asking them to indemnify us and hold the city harmless for the work that they perform would be a wise move. So I support that position to protect ourselves. And hopefully they will be agreeable to that scenario. But if not, we can go back to the drawing board. A question that I have, Rhea, is I have asked in the past if the Valley Transit can put up the bus stops for people when they're waiting out on the street in the elements. Sometimes we have rain, like today, there's snow. So are they moving forward with putting those bus stops throughout our community to for passengers to wait safely through the cities?
I don't know the answer to that, other than I can tell you that actually there's board members here, but I know that they are in constant monitoring use of transit in College Place. They're familiar with our plans, our UGA, where this, school's gonna build. So I think they're looking into it, but I don't know the answer about covered. I can find that out, or we can have another council member find out, and we'll get back to you on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Peterson.
What are the size of these projects? I'm trying to understand, is this pouring concrete and putting a post up, or what?
This would be improving to ADA compliance. So that involves quite a bit of cutting into the sidewalk, and concrete, I think, is really their biggest expense. Moving bus stops as we improve our roads and different places are built, decommissioning bus stops if need be. I want to say that right now what we have in plans is that they're interested in is 8th Street. Does that sound right, Mike? So right now on their radar is 8th Street, moving a bus stop.
I can't disagree with anything that's been said, but on the other hand, I would hate to walk away from a gift just because we can't do the certificate of insurance or something, and I still don't understand. Possibly they have to go through the board, but a lot of those are like $1 million coverage, and then you can write them quick and get them out, and you're covered. Minimal expense. It's like, it's included in your insurance premium typically, even so. Even back and forth, I would hate to walk away from a gift because we're worried that somebody might be injured pouring concrete or something like
Mhm.
that. And vice versa. So I don't know if it sounds good to be tough on this, and to make them do what they're gonna do, but I would, that whole process, I wouldn't want to walk away from, free money.
I'm actually going to do a quick leapfrog, and Councilmember Sherman is going to have some things to contribute here.
Yeah, so I'm chair of Valley Transit this year and have been last year and in years past, so have a good working relationship with Angie. So when I saw this on the agenda, I reached out to her to get some additional context on this. Basically, this particular situation, when she was talking about Larch and 8th, is moot because we have moved on. We have concrete contractors that are signed up to do the bus stop ADA fixes in College Place and Walla Walla. When talking about the indemnify stuff, she actually forwarded me an email where she wrote to the two of you and said they see no issues with the proposed mutual indemnification language. So not sure why you're saying she was adamantly against it or firmly against it, because she would be willing to work on it. What I'm reading in the email that you put in the packet is that she wasn't seeing the need to go back and forth and negotiate each little project like this that they were talking about, not the indemnification. So I just want to clarify those pieces. But I agree with her that like where she's thinking, like if we're doing it, so like on Rose Street, if there was a place for a bus stop, if you guys have it all torn up, what's wrong with like doing the pad for this? The Valley Transit team is more than capable of doing that. We can go out and get funding and handle it on our own. They were just looking at this as a way to kind of like piggyback if those things were already happening. So as everybody here knows, Angie is involved in all things in the city of College Place, Walla Walla, Port County. She knows everything that's going on and she's paying attention to those types of things to have a cost savings for any organization, taxpayers, whomever. And so it's not that we can't do it. She's just wanting to make sure that we're not duplicating the work. And so that part, I mean, that's what she's good at her job. So I'm excited to hear the conversation and absolutely, if they were like 100% and said, no, we can't hold College Place harmless, then why the hell would we do that? There's no reason to do that, right? Like that doesn't make any logical sense. So I'm grateful that I have the documentation that it wasn't her intent, that it really is, but this has been going on for a long time. And so it was finally like, well, we had to move forward because we have timelines for when we have to have everything up to code. So that's where that is. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I'll just respond. Yes, absolutely. We did come to an agreement about mutual indemnification.
I thought you just said that you didn't.
And I was not clear.
Oh,
So it started out, every contract that I work on, you indemnify us, right?
Right.
That's the starting point. They're another governmental agency. So when she proposed mutual indemnification, I sent that to our risk pool and said, what do you think of this? Is another public agency? It would be, put ourselves in their shoes if we were doing the ask. She's the risk, Carlene Brown is the name of our agent at the risk. She said, that's fine. And this I didn't include in it. She said, I agree with you in that the city should not agree to have one agreement covering all projects. There are certain risks and insurance requirements associated with each project. The city should protect itself and make sure the scope of the work, risks involved, pertains to the insurance required via the contract.
that makes sense.
So when we do a public works contract, it's never mutually indemnification. They indemnify us unless a court says otherwise. So it's just those projects where they come to us with something they already have indemnification from that third party. We're not getting the benefit of that indemnification.
Yep.
So that's the disconnect. So yes, Angie has been great to work with. We both went, she went to her attorney. I went, I've been working with her attorney. Agree. This is just a risk. We've gotten to places in liability range with roads and development. So I wanted to bring it to your attention so you can advise. There's a risk if we agree and we say mutual indemnification, but it's a legal binding contract and we're fine with that. Our risk insurer wouldn't recommend that. And if there is this other third party involved who's
Right.
indemnifying Valley Transit.
Can I ask, I'm just wanting to make sure I understand. So let's say Valley Transit says they're going to put in a curb. I'm just making it up. I don't know. And they're going to put in the curb. They hire the contractor, they get identification. Somebody on the contractor's team gets hurt, right? Breaks a leg, whatever. They can't sue Valley Transit for it, but they might sue College Place for it.
If we're doing for Valley Transit.
But, okay, so I'm not understanding.
So they want to hire our public works.
Oh,
They want to hire our public works department to do their capital projects.
oh, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't understand that part.
Right.
That it was our public works. I thought it was a third party, but,
Yeah,
that they were
that's,
hiring.
that was my initial thought. and
Right,
that's-
so I thought that's
Like,
what you
if
said.
they-
No,
Engineer
yes.
or architect, and they come to us with the plans and say, implement this, and we'll pay you to implement this, to build this.
That was my understanding that they were
Right.
gonna hire our public works, and that's what
Right.
my two initial kind of thoughts were.
Right. And so there is, it's small, I assume it's a small risk, but there is a risk that there's some sort of default in that third party. We're not indemnified for that. The third party that did the work that we accepted from Valley Transit.
Okay, okay. Councilmember Williams.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, Valley Transit, just like us, when they do a contract with an engineer to design something, their boilerplate says you will indemnify Valley Transit, and the engineer has insurance to do that. However, if then they pass that contract on to us to implement, or that design, that engineer's indemnification does not cover us. So I'm wondering if would be possible to have a second boilerplate for Valley Transit that says, if they're planning to have us do the work, that says you will indemnify Valley Transit and the city of College Place. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, so that we agree to this contract, we indemnify each other. But if they have anyone else on their end indemnifying them, we won't accept the project unless that person's indemnifying the city as well.
And if it was put into the boilerplate, it seems like it would not be that difficult, maybe? I don't know.
I think that's a good idea.
I don't know what their attorneys would say about that, or their insurance people would say about that, but it just seems to me that I believe fairly often that engineers are called upon to indemnify both the owner and the contractor, which is essentially the city is the contractor in this scenario, I think.
That's correct.
Okay, so that was just a suggestion that I had that may or may not be helpful. So take it for what it's worth.
No, I think that's a good idea. I think that if that's the direction staff wants to go, I can lob that back to Angie.
Can you give me a scenario of what could possibly be, like, if we're doing the work, we take an engineer's drawings and we're doing it. What could happen that we need to be indemnified for?
Can I respond to that? As an
Yes,
engineer? Okay, so Valley Transit asked an engineer to design them a beautiful new cover for their bus stops. And the engineer does that, indemnifies Valley Transit. However, the engineer forgot to account for wind. And the first time the wind comes up, the top of the structure goes off. It causes damage, hopefully only to property, but possibly to people as well. So the people who are damaged go, oh, Valley Transit, it's your bus stop. And Valley Transit's like, not us. And the engineer's like, not us. and College Place is left because we did the work. Even though it was the engineer's mistake.
All right. That's a good
So
scenario for
if the
me.
engineer is
Yeah.
indemnifying both of us, then they have to go after the engineer, not us. Is that the,
That
That's what you
was a
understand.
good example. And even if often in my career I've heard, but we're right and they're wrong. And I said, yes, we'd win in court, but it takes a lot of money to get to that point. So, and that's where the indemnify and defend.
Yeah.
comes in.
So
Right,
now
and-
understanding that, we can't take that risk.
well,
Well,
and it also just simplifies it for even the people who are damaged. It's really clear who they need to go after.
Right.
Otherwise, you end up with dueling insurance companies and it's not pretty.
Okay, and then I want to follow up quickly on Councilmember Jessup's consideration of public works staff. What did Mr. McAndrews give any feedback on the thought of being responsible for these, or is this something we normally do?
I don't think this is something we normally do. And Mr. McAndrews has been involved in the discussions quite a bit, and he's concerned about staff. But Valley Transit would pay for that portion. So the wages and administrative cost on top of that, you know, we would get, we won't be giving anything away for free. But then it's just a matter of bodies. Do we have a body to do that extra bit? But when you're building a big road, what's the actual percentage for that, you know, ADA compliant revision? Is it such a small percentage that it can be handled? But that was his concern. And I think we alleviated that concern when we said we can say no. If they want us to do it, we have the option to say no, we don't have staffing to do it. And that alleviated his concern.
And then Valley Transit just hires their own contractors to come and do it?
Yes, like what is happening now.
That's what's happening now?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Sorry. Sorry, I just didn't know how that worked.
No, thank you. That's great. Thank you.
I've learned a lot about the process of public
Yeah.
works. So, yeah,
Okay, so what you're asking is guidance.
which I think I've gotten.
Feel like you've gotten the guidance?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And if we need to come back to council, we will do that, but I will communicate with Angie and Mike and Robert.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments? It's not 9 o'clock yet, so if we don't come up with something to talk about, we might have to go home. All right. Thank you so much. That was very helpful.
Oh, sorry, I didn't explain it very well. I've been living with it for so long. It's kind of like forest for the trees, right? You're like, are you all living in my brain?
Yep. Okay. So that's all our discussion items, our topics. We are now at closing items. Is there any other business for good of the order?
Go enjoy the snow.
All right. Yeah, it was snowing pretty good about, I don't know, 40 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago. All right, so if there is no opposition, I will conclude the workshop at 7:19 PM.
2 inches.
2 inches of snow expected. Yeah. Thank you all very much. Take some snacks.
Can
Good
you
night.
pack me some snacks?
Yeah, I know. You want some, there's a nice little tray out here.
Bye.
Have a good night.
I love the snow.
I do.
And I've never had a garage in my life.
If Felicia doesn't have to drive a Piasto in there, I feel bad.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
For me or for Mike?
Well, probably.
Okay.
Never necessarily been through it with the application before, but with respect, I was hoping to kind of
Yeah.
I looked through the application with her,
Yeah.
and I can't write
Yeah.
anything for her. I was like, I
Yeah.
can't, I think I'm allowed to,
Yeah,
But the one thing that I was hoping to look for, and this is all
Yeah.
this is my fault, 'cause I didn't
Oh.
know in advance,
okay,
is, like the scoring criteria?
yeah,
We could not find on the application where we would fill the requirement, so where we could explain the.
Oh.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
in the application,
Yeah.
what we saw was
Yeah.
like, the two chart.
yeah,
But
I'll look,
so we couldn't find, and like I said, I don't mean any disrespect, I'm just
Yeah.
advocating,
Yeah.
but
yeah,
it was kind of like, well, we don't know, I remember standing here with her going, we don't know where we're supposed